me start you guys off with a quote that you can just think about for a couple seconds. Ralph Waldo Emerson once said that there is no knowledge that is not power. So why wouldn't you strive for knowledge if you know that knowledge is giving you power? I think a common concept that a lot of people tend to misinterpret or don't exactly understand is the concept of space. A lot of people look up at the sky on a clear night and they see stars and they see planets and satellites and the moon, but don't quite know how to interpret exactly what they're seeing. Well, the Cosmos documentary, narrated by Neil deGrasse Tyson, explains that some of the bright stars that we see might not be exactly what we interpret them to be. Sometimes you see a bright star in the sky, and because of how far away we are from those stars, think about it this way. If you're on a long road and you see two things, the farther that you get away from those two things, what starts to happen to them? Someone help me out. They get closer and closer together. So because of our perspective on the earth, of us looking at those stars, it could be two stars right next to each other, but we're just perceiving it as one because of how far away we are. In a three-dimensional sense, it could also be a clot of stars that we're perceiving as one star, again, because of how far away we are. The distance remains so large, actually, that the light that our eyes are receiving from those stars is the light that those stars were giving off years ago. So we look up into the sky and the stars that we see might actually not be there anymore. The speed of light travels like very quickly, but the distance is so vast that the light takes a long time to travel into our cortex. Vice versa, if we were to somehow find a way to get out to those stars, currently there's no way for mankind, like in a spacecraft or anything of that sort, to get out to the distance of where those stars are, except for a wormhole. But if we were to do so, we would be looking at Earth and we would be watching history unfold. So we would be looking at Earth, but it would really be the light that we're seeing from Earth from years and years and years ago. So hypothetically, if you were on a star the way that we're on Earth, looking down at Earth, you could like watch the Civil War happen or something crazy like that. But how would we get to that star? And that brings me to my second point. The only way that we would get out there is a wormhole. And Einstein's book on relativity explains that gravity affects places and time depending on where you are. So a wormhole basically is a distortion of gravity. So if you're trying to get from point A to point B, what gravity does is it bends time and space. So it allows you to travel straight from one wormhole out the other without having to pass through all of that space. In the same respect, being on a planet with a higher or lower gravity level might mean that you're experiencing a different time than the people back on Earth. If you're on a planet with a higher gravity level, you could be spending 3 minutes on that planet while the people on Earth are really living for about 100 years. So with all that time going by, you would wonder where all the resources are going, and there's got to be a resource problem. So that brings me to my third point. Our world has a pretty gnarly resource problem, but one of the ways that we can solve this is finding a way to travel at the speed of light. So if you travel at the speed of light, you actually stop aging completely. So I can put this into perspective for you guys. If your grandmother lives in California and you live in New York, and your grandmother says she's gonna walk to your place in New York, and she leaves when she's 79, she might get there by the time she's 80. But if your grandmother tells you that she's gonna jog or run or take a car, then she might get there when she's 79 and a half. So the faster you're going, the shorter time transpires as that time is happening. So I had an idea that if we could travel at the speed of light and you do stop aging, because of that, if you travel 80% the speed of light or any given percent of the speed of light, you age that much slower. So if you're traveling at 80% the speed of light, then you're aging 80% slower than everybody else on Earth. So to solve this resource problem, an idea that I had was, what if we could get X amount of people X million amount of people on some kind of spacecraft that was traveling at the speed of light or at 80% the speed of light, the people on that spacecraft would only need food and resources for 3 years, while the people on Earth are needing food and resources for 300 years. So with that said, I hope that the next time you guys look up at the night sky on a clear night, you think of it as a little bit less of a foreign object and something that you can conceptually understand and finally know a couple of cool things about that you can share with your friends.
You don't have to put questions.
Oh, I don't? Okay.